Honorary Secretary and founder of the Dolphin Spark Historical Society, compiling and editing their publication by the sign of the Dolphin. In addition to an honours business and management degree, Cathy holds a certificate and masters in local history and Maynooth. Her master's thesis research was published by Four Courts Press as it was called The South Circular Road, Dublin on the Eve of the First World War, and with an abridged version was awarded the silver medal by the Old Dublin Society in 2018. Cathy is actively involved in a wide range of community events from the 1916 Rice Centenary commemorations. She was researching the Royal Commain 1916 commemoration photographic exhibition and publication called 1916 in the South Dublin Union for St James's Hospital. Cathy is currently working as a historian in residence with ourselves, Dublin City Council, for the South Central and South East area. And of course then Liz Gillis. Liz is a historian and author from the Liberties. She is the author of 6 books about the Irish Revolution, including The Fall of Dublin, Women of the Irish Revolution, The Hales Brothers and the Irish Revolution, and May 25, The Morning of the Custom House 1921. Liz has worked as a researcher on numerous publications, television and radio documentaries covering the Revolutionary period. And Liz is the historian in residence for South Dublin County Council for the decade of centenaries. She lectures at Chaplain College Dublin and was the researcher for the history show on RTÉ Radio. Liz was a historical consultant for the new Custom House Visitor Centre and was a curatorial assistant in RTÉ, specialising in researching the East Horizon. And in 2018, Liz was the recipient of the Lord Mayor's Award for our contribution to Irish history. So you're in very capable hands today. I'm sure I've actually seen this talk before, so it's a really, really good talk, and who better to give it. So I'll hand you now over to Liz and Cathy, so everybody enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much. Before Anne-Marie disappears, I just want to say a huge thank you to her on behalf of Liz and myself for all the arrangements for this talk, but also for what she did during COVID, because we got a chance to do a version of this online, and we really broke our heart, but we managed to get it done, and it's still there up online. But we promised then to ourselves and to Anne-Marie that we'd come back and do this in person. So here's a promise kept. So we're here tonight, okay? Your own history group, Ken and Sean and the other lads involved, and Suzanne and a few more, they actually have their own version of the build-up to this talk, the build-up to this event, and also the ambush itself. So this is done by Ballyfermot, about Ballyfermot, which is absolutely brilliant. It is online, Ken, I understand.
Oh yeah.
And there's 1 or 2 DVDs available here. The name of it is Forgotten Ballyfermot, 1919, 1921, the Irish Revolution. So when things like this are done, they really deserve to be promoted. So fair play. This is a really important part of the War of Independence. It happened right here. So no better than to get people from here to tell that story. So I just want to commend the lads on this. Say there's a couple here, we might raffle them off the best question at the end or something, but also it is online.
Can I just say, Cathy, if anyone wants, I can send on the link if you want to leave their email addresses, you know what I mean? It's just
to say that, just to back it up. And to be honest, it's probably better than the talk we're going to do tonight, so anyway, without further ado, let's get into the story of what happened in Ballyfermot, just about a half a mile away from where we are tonight, 100 and nearly 102 years ago. So we're going to tell the story. Have you all seen the plaque? Yeah, some of you have, some of you haven't. Do you know where it is? Do you? Yeah, well done. That's a beautiful plaque put up as part of the decade of commemorations and put up to commemorate this incident because it's of really important significance. It's on the railway bridge up at Luffeney Road, and it was a really big event. In fact, I think my next picture shows how big it was. The Lord Mayor, that's the lady in green there, she unveiled it. I mean, look at the job, they actually got the wall painted and cleared away all the overgrowth and everything. It was just a fantastic day. What made it even more special, it was 101 years after the incident that the plaque was unveiled. But the incident had happened on a Friday, and it happened that 101 years after it was on a Friday. The reason it didn't happen for the centenary, do you remember COVID? Yeah, that's why, it couldn't happen. It was one of the very first events that happened. The unveiling of the plaque was one of the very first after COVID events that took place, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. As the plaque was being unveiled, a train went under the railway bridge. So if you really wanted to feel like you were part of a moment of history, that was it. So you actually could feel, you know, the bridge slightly shaking, you know, that noise the train makes going on. That happened as the plaque was unveiled. So it was a really special day. But before we get to that, we have to build it. So this, thanks to Mr. Google Maps, is Ballyfermot today. You can see all the housing estates, all the little crescents, all the keyholes, you know, the various layouts of the estate, and the industrial estate as well. So this is a completely different world to the one that was here 102 years ago. But there are some things that are still the same. And of course, that's the line at the top there, the railway line. That's exactly where it was. It hasn't moved, they haven't changed it yet. And just out of our picture, the canal will be there as well. So that's the landscape within which this happened, but that's what it looks like today. If you can just hold that picture in your head for a minute, and then I'll put this up. That's the map from about 102, about 100 years ago. That's the map. And look at how different it is. Where all the houses are today, all that white, they're all fields. And all those lines are their field boundaries. So Mr. Murphy's field ended here and Mr. Smith's field was there. You know, they're all field boundaries. What you can make out, though, is the railway line. You make it out very clearly at the very top of the image, and the canal, the other straight line there. They're not too far away from each other. You know, when we were driving down Kymore tonight, you went over one bridge, just went a short distance, and then you went over another bridge. So you can see the canal and the railway are kind of parallel, all coming out of this part of Ballyfermot. You can make out bits of bluebell here, bits of housing, organised housing in that part of Dublin. But when you go up, can't you see all the Inchicore works? Look at all those lines feeding into the railway line. That's the Inchicore works. So that is the big landmark in this area over 100 years ago. That's what it would have been, a really important landmark. And it's important for more than one reason. You have all the communities living around there. So you have little hamlets, you have little cottage clusters, as well as the larger farmhouses. So that's the type of environment we're talking about, and that's what it would have been like to live here at the time. And to bring us up to Luffenoo Road, do you know where the Lawns is in Ballyfermot? Well, if we were to get out a few shovels and go up there, I'm not recommending this by the way, but if we were to do this and start digging, what we would find under the lawns is the remains of a castle, a church, and a graveyard. And they actually would have been there. They would have been landmarks in among all those fields 100 years ago. You would have spotted that. That would have been your landmark for where you were heading to. So this is, you know, people from the city are going to come out here, as an incident's going to happen on the bridge, but they have to have that landmark so they know where they're heading to. So you have Ballyfermot Castle, the church, the graveyard. You can just see I took a sample from one of the old maps. There's actually from Ken's collection of photographs, which is such a valuable resource out here, and we minded furiously Ken, with a big acknowledgement to it. But some of the photographs that he has online, we could actually include them in the images tonight. So that's a picture of the gable of the church, and that's one of the old drawings of Ballyfermot Castle when it was a real lived-in castle. That would be your landmark for the general area of where we're going to at the time. And of course, this is probably pretty much what it looked like. It's you know, it is just farmland. There's the railway bridge off the distance. What you can see are, of course, the telegraph poles. They're important. They would have been a reasonably new addition to the railway line 100 and odd years ago, because we were beginning to get phones, beginning to get connected. But you see the embankments on either side. That's the remains of when they dug the railway originally, and they just left the mounds of clay on the side, and that formed that kind of embankment. And that becomes important in the story later. It's like, you see the mounds on either side there, it's literally, they dug out the clay and just left it there, and then grassed over the years. So that was the landscape around the railway line and around the bridge itself. And of course, not leaving out the other bridge. So you have the canal further up. The road links up the two bridges. It was your route to Clondalkin, your route to Bluebell, your route towards Red Cow. Beg your pardon?
The roads.
Yeah, the bridge there links the road further up with Liffanoo. We know it's Liffanoo Road today. So you can see there, it's very rural at the canal as well. What we find is, every so often along the canal, you find a pub. Splendid isolation in the middle of nowhere. And then, of course, the reason for that was, in the heyday of the canal, you'd change the horses there, and you'd have a rest, and you'd have stuff. So it is Dublin after all. But that would have been a stopping point. And that's why you had a pub near the lock and near the canal bridge itself. So that bridge links with the railway. So that's the road that we're actually talking about. So as I said, past Inchicore, a rural landscape, large farms, cottage clusters. If I had a look, we had a look at the 11th census, because that was the best census we could use for researching this. Have a look and see, what did people do? I mean, what were the residents of this area involved in? And we found quite a lot of farmers. Surprise, surprise. You find the fields, you find the farmers. And those who weren't farmers would give their occupation as a labourer or a dairyman, quite a lot of them. So it was dairy farms that we had out here. A good few people gave their occupation as a mill worker. So the mills in question are the mills in Killeen, in Clondalkin, or those in Bluebell. So the Cammock mills would have been there originally. A good chunk of people put down the waterworks as their employer. And this is where the canal comes into its own, because they were siphoning off water from the canal for use further down in the city. So people were actually employed in the waterworks and had housing in the waterworks itself along the canal bank. But the best and the biggest number of those not occupied as farmers or labourers or dairy hands or whatever, they gave their job as the railway works in Inchicore. Yeah, most of the people, if they were working somewhere, they put down some job related to the railway in Inchicore. So the railway is really important to the area. And just as an aside, the whole area is closely associated with the 4th Battalion of the IRA. So what they're doing in their spare time, we don't have television, we don't have internet access or anything like that, they're actually involved in the 4th Battalion of the IRA. So that is the build-up to the area. A couple of other rural images, just to show you what the landscape is like. It really is countryside. You see the farms stretched as far as the eye can see. And most of that is suburbs now, but at the time it wasn't. And they're really good pictures. It kind of brings you right back and makes you feel like you're there, and you can actually picture it like this. So what about Dublin 100 plus years ago? What was it like? Let's consider the political landscape just for a minute. The whole place is recovering from the 1916 rising. And when I say recovering, we're trying to rebuild the city centre, which has been pretty much obliterated by the whole thing.
And the bulk roads as well.
Everything. We're talking about 1921, so there's been a lot of incidents in the lead up to this. The anti-conscription campaign, so this would be around 1918. What happened was that Britain wanted to bring conscription, going to send everyone to war. And we really resisted it here. That one action by Britain did more to unite Irish people politically than anything else did. Every faction said no, we don't want it. There's been a massive anti-conscription campaign. That all builds up the resistance, the resistance to British rule. It's all part of. Of course, that ends because, World War I ends. ends in 1918. So there's no war, no conscription, it never happened. But it was all part of that building of feeling towards anti-British feeling, really. Immediately after the war ends, they set up a general election. It was 8 years since we'd had an election. And look at all the things that have happened in that 8 years. So the first thing they do is they hold the election. And to give you an idea, we're in the South Central constituency today. But if I was to show you what that looked like 100 years ago, I would be telling you, you would be either in the St. James's division or the St. Patrick's division. They were the names that they gave to this, what we call South Central today. And look who got elected in the St. James's division, Joe McGrath. So Joe McGrath, who you later hear about with the Irish sweepstakes, he had been involved in the 1916 rising, and so he was part of that. And of course the St. Patrick's division, let's hear it for the women, in the St. Patrick's division they elect Countess Markovich, the first woman to be elected to a parliament anywhere in the world. So the Rebel Liberties really means it when they say it, because St. Patrick's division would be pretty much the Liberties of Dublin today. So that whole, what we call those divisions, is pretty much South Central. We're still in that constituency, although we're out here at the moment. On the 21st of January 1919, the first Dáil was held, and it's held in the Mansion House in Dublin. And the two reps for the area, Joe McGrath and the Countess, well, when it came to calling their name on the roll, it was answered that they were Fé Glas a Gulf, which means imprisoned by the foreigner. So they're in jail, the two of them, and they managed to get elected. Probably the best thing you could have on your election manifesto at the time, that you're in jail and getting elected. Coincidentally, the same day of the first Dáil, there's an incident down in Tipperary in a little quarry in a place called Sullihead Beck, where two RIC officers are killed. They were taking the dynamite that was being transported to the quarry. That generally is accepted as being the beginning of the War of Independence. So one day in Irish history, and look what was happening, all happening in the one day. So that's where the War of Independence that we're talking about tonight, that's where it began, that particular day. Give you an idea of the type of incidents that were happening. Here's one from Crumlin. And that's what the RIC barracks would have looked like over in Crumlin. Today, if any of you know the Crumlin area, if you know Bunting Road, yeah, the bottom of Bunting Road near Crumlin Village, that's where the RIC barracks was. It was right there. It moved the Garda station up to the other end of the village. But yeah, it always had some sort of building. It was quite an attractive building as well. You can see it there. Here's an account by Joe Gillis from the witness statements. And he said that the Crumlin RIC barracks was to be destroyed, going to be mined by engineers. They saturated it in petrol, they lit the fuse, and as the front hall began to burn, they could hear shouting from inside and discovered that one of the engineer guys was still in the building as it was going up. They managed to rescue him, but his hands and his face were badly burned. He's brought from there to Miss Flood's house for treatment, where a doctor was called and he was treated there. Have you any idea where Miss Flood's house might be? Do you all know McDonald's? Yeah. That's where Miss Flood's house was, right? So McDonald's on the Kylmore Road, that's Port Leicester House. And the Floods ran a house that was like a safe house. It was a place where you go for first aid, for care, and the name keeps coming up in various witness statements and various events in the area over the years. But Floods was a very popular location for anything that was happening. The other thing as well, they have close connections with St. Patrick's Athletic, and the Floods on one occasion gave one of their fields as a pitch to St. Pat's. So they're involved in every aspect of social life, sporting life, and revolution life in the area. So that's where the chap who was injured in Crumlin was brought. Another little one, just to bring us up, what is going on. So this is taken from Joseph Kinsel's witness statement. And he is telling us here that he's working in the Inchicore Works. So you see how this is all lining up. The Inchicore Works is becoming very, very important to the story. He would repair volunteers' damaged guns. I thought they were supposed to be building trains, but they were actually repairing guns on the occasion. Any defective weapons were also sent through to be repaired. There were volunteers that had technical knowledge, all working in the works, but they belonged to different battalions. He just goes on to say that one day they were approached by the director of munitions, Sean Russell, and suggested them that they could get in touch with all the battalion commandants and instruct them to work under his direction. And the meeting was held in Emmett Hall in Inchicore. You know where Emmett Hall is on the Inchicore Road, not far from Richmond Barracks there. So that's where that was held. And as a result of the meeting, went around various departments within the works and instructed the men what they wanted done. So this is a repair shop behind the Irish Revolution. These are the things, the support network behind them. Just to give you a couple of little things, the British forces got the word that things were going on in the works. It was raided about once a fortnight, never got anything, never found anything. Eventually they put a military post on the gate, constantly manned by 6 to 8 personnel. Still didn't find anything, never found out what was going on. In the foundry department, they could turn out anything up to 36 grenades a day. And yet, this was all under the close watch of the security forces around them. They still managed to do it. In the machine department, they could do a lot of drilling and tapping on grenades, so they could actually get them ready for action. About a fortnight into the scheme, it was working splendidly, and at this stage, they're producing anything up to 40 or 50 finished grenades a week. So it's a right production line that's running, again taken from Joe Kinsel's witness statement. Now, have you heard of Bloody Sunday as part of one of the big events in the War of Independence? Happens in Croke Park. Earlier in the day, there had been a number of assassinations around the city.
That was bad.
Pardon?
That was very bad.
Yeah, this is it.
Very
Now, this is very local. Although it happens in Croke Park, there's always something worth having a look at these incidents, see, can you find that local connection? And this is it. Joe Traynor, this young chap here, he's from Ballyfermot, the cottages of Ballyfermot, actually at the Red Cow end of things. And how you can pick out the cottage today, if you're going up from Red Cow towards Ballyfermot, or heading in the direction of Walthamstown, you'll notice one of the cottages has a lot of agricultural implements still in the front garden, like an old plough, and there's various things all painted up in the garden. That's the cottage he grew up in. That's the cottage Joe Traynor grew up in. He was involved in the Robert Emmons GAA Club, which was located on the Nace Road, very near Red Cow. So he was involved with that. He was actually captain of them. And Joe goes to the match in Croke Park. And as the shooting started at Croke Park, he tried to escape over the wall near the canal end. And he shot a number of times. He's brought actually to the Ring family home, which was quite near. So you've heard of Neil Ring. He was Lord Mayor of Dublin a number of years ago. It's his family, it's his ancestors. And they cared for Joe. He dies later in Gerrard Street Hospital. And imagine the scene in that little rural cottage in Ballyfermot, because they had no idea what's happened. And someone eventually managed to cycle out to the house to tell them that Joe had died. It's a real tragic, tragic story. But the other local connection is Joe was buried in Bluebell Cemetery. And that's his grave in Bluebell, completely restored by the family. Again, local cemetery, had only opened in 1904, so it would have been a fairly new burial ground at the time. The land was given by Lord Lansdowne, hence the Lansdowne Valley in Drumna. The land had been given by him, but if you can find Joe Traynor's grave quite easily. You can see how distinctive it is and how well cared it is. But he is a victim of Bloody Sunday. He was also a member of the 4th Battalion, but that had nothing to do with what happened that day. He happened to be just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was at the match. So that's the story of Joe Traylor, a local story, but a national event that we still haven't got over. We're still talking about it, the events of Croke Park. The other thing that was happening quite a lot was any form of transport that was moving around the area was constantly being attacked or raided. Now here's one incident: lorries destroyed. These were loaded with bricks and mortar at the brickworks in Doffelsburn. That's the Crumlin shopping centre if anybody's trying to find a location today. The reason it was had bricks and mortar being loaded onto it, they were bringing them out to Baldonnel, because Baldonnel was under construction at the time. So they were using the route out to Baldonnel constantly. On this occasion, the driver was ordered to drive to the Kimmage quarry, and the lorries were dumped there. That is Eamon Cant Park on Sundrive Road, if you're trying to find the location. The following day, the British military returned. They succeeded in retrieving one lorry, was said to Liz on the way out. Someday they'll be digging in Sundrive Park and they're going to find the other one. So the lorry is under the ground in the quarry somewhere, which is now the running track and playing fields in Sundrive. So someday the lorry will give itself up, but it wasn't found. It had sunk right to the bottom of the quarry. It's never been found. They found one, didn't get the other. Here's another incident on the Bluebell, the Nace Road. 2 British dispatch motorcycle riders are held up. Their bikes and the dispatches are confiscated. The dispatches are sent to headquarters and the bicycles eventually handed over to volunteer unit in South County Dublin. We had to mention South County Dublin. Liz is working in that area now. But just shows you, every other day there'd be some incident, some event happening in the general area, because that would be your nearest main road. And word like that would spread around the area. They would be your talking points all through the War of Independence. Now, this is an incident that often gets mixed up with the one we're going to talk about later, because there wasn't just one incident on the bridge, the railway bridge in Ballyfermot, there were 2. And this is the first one. And it is a newspaper cutting, and in the newspaper cutting we're told an ambush took place yesterday afternoon at Ballyfermot, you know, the 2 T's on the end of Ballyfermot, near Chapel, is it? So we're rural area, we're trying to find locations that people can pick out. Sergeant Hallisey of the RIC is killed, and Head Constable Mulrooney and Constable Neal are seriously injured. This is the newspaper account. The killed and wounded men were members of a small cycling patrol said to have been proceeding from Dublin to Lucan. The point where the shooting occurred is something over 2 miles west of the city. It was actually at the railway bridge. Following the ambush, most of the houses in Clondalkin were searched by Crown forces. Can you imagine the impact of that in a small village like Clondalkin, as it would have been at the time? And the line there says, most of the houses in Clondalkin are raided. That's literally doors being kicked in, houses being ransacked. Said that many houses in the Inchicore district were also raided. But they have an idea of who they're looking for. It stated that employees at the Inchicore Railway Works were questioned and searched. So that is very much on their radar. They know that there's things going on in the railway works. They haven't quite worked out what they are. Dublin Castle issued the following report late in the evening. A cycle patrol of the RIC consisting of a head constable and 3 other police was ambushed at Ballyfermot in the Lucan district at 1:30 this afternoon. Sergeant Hallisey was killed, Head Constable Mulrooney and Constable Neal were seriously wounded. That is what you would have read about in the newspapers. Let's see what the witness statements say about the same event. This is taken from, what should the witness one? Is it? Thank you. Yes, sorry. hadn't room in the screen to put it all on. February 1921, the local volunteers of the company became fairly active in seizing British military transport. Remember, I showed you the previous slide, the way the events were happening. And destroy it either by fire or by putting it out of action by smashing it up. One day, a lorry was taken down to Bluebell Lane in the vicinity of the Nugget factory. Have you heard of the Nugget cottages? Yeah, okay, so we'll explain what that is in a minute. And destroyed by burning. 4 RIC men went down to examine the truck. So it's a slightly different story to the one that's in the newspaper. They're in the vicinity at the time decided that we would attack this RIC party. We took up a position near the railway bridge at Ballyfermot, and as the RIC were returning to their station in Lucan, we ambushed them, killing 2 and wounding 1. The British military arrived on the scene in a short time, and we withdrew as quickly as we could because it could just melt into the countryside. You know how rural the whole scene was. We also managed to get the official British report of the incident. You can see they go into a lot of detail. But pretty much they say about dispatching the cyclists out to investigate what had happened in Bluebell first, and that they moved on, that the group were moved on then, they were heading back to Lucan. And it's just interesting when you put them all side by side because you get little bits more of information about the actual event. And here is a picture from the city archive of the actual Nugget Boot factory. It's the old Cammock Mills in Bluebell. It's an industrial estate today, and that's how we get the cottages called the Nugget cottages. They're called after the boot polish that was made in the old Cammock Mills. And of course, we've no difficulty identifying where this was painted in huge letters on the roof of the building itself. But can you imagine them bringing the lorries down there and setting them on fire and pretty much setting the trap for the road between the canal and the railway bridge? So that whole area is involved in that one incident. Delighted to have found that. That picture couldn't be taken today. The mill is gone. The mill building is gone. The only thing that remains there are a gate post that used to lead into the mill itself. And that is a picture of the funeral in the north of Ireland of Head Constable Edward Mulrooney, and you can see it's a massive funeral. It's a fantastic photograph actually because it stretches off way into the distance. So these are all the various ways an incident was reported, and sometimes this incident gets a bit muddled with the one Liz is going to explain about in a few minutes. Now, the new tactic. As the War of Independence moved on, it goes from transport raids into really big deals. And here we have attacking trains. In 1920, we have incidents listed at Mill Street in County Cork, Durrow Station, Ballylynch level crossing at Waterford, Headford Junction in Killarney. We have a major incident at Upton. There's others in Limerick, there's Armagh, and it just went on. Literally, the whole railway system became a target. If you could cripple the railway system, it meant they couldn't move troops and equipment around easily. So it was actually a really good tactic for actually slowing everything up here in Ireland. In Dublin, nearer to home, there's incidents in Drumcondra, there's another one in Leicester, and of course we have the one in Ballyfermot. Over to you, Liz. Take it from there.
Thanks, Cathy. Right, so I have to follow that. So I'm going to talk about the ambush itself, but I just want to put into context what the British government were thinking literally at this time 102 years ago, because today is the 25th of May. And on this day, 102 years ago, you had Cornwall Custom House, where it looked like the IRA were wiped out. The Dublin Brigade of the IRA were wiped out. So you had close to 300 men and 4 women involved in this operation. 111 men were arrested. They lost 5 volunteers, they were killed. However, the majority of those arrested were from one battalion of the Dublin Brigade of the IRA, which was the 2nd Battalion. We're talking about the area of 4th Battalion. And they were still very active. You have the 3rd Battalion, still very active. You have the 4th Battalion, still very active. But at this moment in time, the British are thinking we've got over 100 lads in prison, the IRA are wiped out, it's all over. No, it wasn't. Because the IRA literally within days changed their tactics. Cathy had mentioned the use of, or the attacking of trains. So that had been practiced. But you also have transport, other methods, modes of transport being attacked. The shell factory down at Houston Station, that was later attacked by the IRA. They destroyed loads of armoured cars, loads of trucks, because if you destroy the transport, as Cathy said, you cannot move the troops from A to B. You cannot send a truck to bring auxiliaries all around Cork. So the IRA adapted their methods, and they had to show the British government as well that you have not destroyed us. So the IRA, the 3rd Battalion, 4th Battalion and the 1st Battalion, they upped their game, which leads us to the ambush, the troop train ambush. So who was involved? Well, you know it is the 4th Battalion of the IRA. So while you have your companies in the various battalions, you have this special unit that was created in late 1920, and this was known as the Active Service Unit, or the ASU. A very small elite unit of men. And here we have a photograph taken around 1938, 1939. What is really interesting about this photograph is that the men in this photograph, 17 years before, were probably trying to kill each other because they fought against each other in the Civil War. Yet here they are, 1948, 49, and they're sitting beside each other, getting this photograph taken. So it just shows that the soldiers themselves, in a lot of cases, were able to come back from the divide of the Civil War. This photograph improves it. But what were the Active Service Unit? So set up in December 1920, you've probably heard of the flying columns. They were operating all around Ireland, and they were mobile units of the IRA. Basically, it was fellas that could not stay at home. They had to go on the run. They're too well known to the authorities. So they literally are full-time mobile units. They would attack the military. You haven't got it in Dublin. You had the companies of the IRA. So it's decided Dublin would have its own active service unit, its own flying column. And it's whole-time service, and there's 4 sections. So what you have is men taken from each of the 4 Dublin battalions. So you've got men from the 4th, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, roughly about 12, 14 men out of each. And the whole idea being was they would operate in their part of the city. So the 4th Battalion was a massive area. It spanned from pretty much Patrick Street out to Clondalkin, Rathfarnham. It's huge. And the whole idea of them was that they would take the fight to the end. Now, they were under the control of GHQ, so Michael Collins is meant to be their boss. And the thing is, when Michael Collins tried to control it, he nearly messed it up. Because what he insisted on the Active Service Unit doing was that if they had an idea to attack a military patrol, they were meant to put in and ask permission for Michael Collins to sanction this, to give permission for them to attack a certain patrol. The one time they do that, the Active Service Unit is nearly all arrested. So they went, no, this ain't happening anymore. If we see an opportunity, we will attack and we'll send in a report later. We're not asking you for permission. So when the opportunities arise, they will then attack. Now, Corey O'Connor, and we have Corey Scuffil here tonight, Dermot, thanks to his account, his witness statement and his diaries, we have so much detail of the activities that happened in the 4th Battalion area. And those that were involved in this particular engagement, most of them are from F Company of the 4th Battalion, which is the company that Corey belongs to. But also, Corey and those men are members of number 4 section of the Active Service Unit who are involved in this operation. Corey was later to become the 2nd Lieutenant of the Active Service Unit. So he's one of the leaders of it. Now, here are some of the others that were involved in this operation. So you can see, all bar one are full battalion. There's a reason Pat McRae, who's from the 2nd Battalion, so he's north side of the city, but there is a reason why he's involved in this operation. But Joe Gillis, he's F Company 4th Battalion. We have George Nolan, he's A Company 4th Battalion, and we've Lawrence Morta, and he's again F Company 4th Battalion. So the men that are involved in this operation, they know each other. They're friends, they're neighbours, they're really close, they know each other's moves. So they're there, they can protect each other, they can rely on each other, they have each other's back. But there's a few others that are involved. There's actually quite a number of men involved, because while you have the active service unit number 4 section, they're being supported by the ranks of the other volunteers. So people that wouldn't have been whole-time soldiers. They're called volunteers because they wear paint. So you actually had a lot of volunteers working, they would get rewards, there's an ambush coming, get out, take part, and then go back to work. It's the active service unit that are the full-time unit. And they include Jimmy McGuinness, again, he's active service unit. We've got Edward Bourne of F Company, Patrick Lanigan of F Company, Liam Keane of F Company, Daniel Jevons of active service unit, Michael Carroll of F Company, and Michael J. Stack. But they are supported by more members of the Irish Volunteers, the 4th Battalion. Now, what is really important here is the Thompson gun. Now, the Thompson submachine gun. The first place to use the actual Thompson submachine gun, we know them made famous by the American gangsters, Al Capone, you see them in all the movies. The first unit or group to use the Thompson submachine gun were the IRA. A number of them, a small number of them, had been imported, had been smuggled into Ireland. May, June, it was actually June 1921. They actually practiced in the use of it, in using the Thompson out in a casino in Reno. There's actual accounts there of them actually practicing with the Thompson. The thing is, they ordered 500 of the Thompson submachine guns, and they never made it to Ireland when they were meant to, because they decided to send them all together in one big shipment, 500 of them. They were impounded in Hoboken. Now, they did arrive in Ireland during the truce and then during the Civil War, but the first time the Thompson submachine gun is successfully used is the Ballyfermot troop train ambush. It had been used at Leicester, but that wasn't successful. The first successful time used is the Ballyfermot troop train ambush. And just to go back, the reason we have Pat McRae, who was 2nd Battalion, who was north side, his job was to bring the Thompson submachine gun to the place of attack and to get it out, because these are such a valuable gun, and he only had a few of them. So his sole job was to get the Thompson out of Ballyfermot. When it's done, get it back to safety. So that's why he's here. Now, why did this ambush happen? Why did this attack happen? Well, I said it earlier, the IRA had to prove to the British that they were not destroyed, that they could carry on the fight. So because you have the 2nd Battalion pretty much devastated with the arrests, the 3rd, 4th and 1st Battalion do up their game. So orders came to the section commander, Paul O'Connor, that a troop train would proceed from Dublin to the Curragh in a certain order, and that it was to be attacked at Ballyfermot. Now the thing is, it is a troop train. It had civilians on the train as well, but also on the train were horses. You have that transport, not just soldiers that are a target. Again, it is that transport to sort of undermine every aspect of the British war machine. Well, here is the target, the Gordon Highlanders. So one of many regiments, many British regiments that were based in Ireland. So they would have been deployed, because the big thing was the British government didn't actually deploy the military. You have the Essex regiment, they're active down in Cork, but the British government, by not using the army, they wouldn't admit that this is actually a war that was going on in Ireland. That's why we have the auxiliaries, that's why we have the black and tans. They're used as police reinforcements. Don't admit to the world that this is actually a war that's going on in Ireland. But you see, as it goes on, before the truce, more regiments of the British Army are beginning to be deployed around the country, so hence they have to be attacked. This was the plan. And it was very simple. This is George Nolan's account of it. So 3 men were to take tins of petrol from a pony and car, bring them along with pieces of sacking. The sacks were to be saturated with petrol and thrown on top of the carriages as the train passed under the bridge. So basically, you would have a number of volunteers spread out over the bridge. And as the train went under, then they would throw over the saturated sacks, or saturated petrol, and then the attack would begin. One man of our party, armed for the first time with a Thompson submachine gun, was to spray the tops of the carriages with fire and light the saturated petrol sacks. We took a position as ordered. 4 of us were on the bridge, and Jimmy McGuinness with the Thompson machine gun. The remainder of the section were at both sides of the railway behind the embankment. So Cathy showed you the photograph there, the embankment, you can see it clearly. So while we got volunteers on the bridge, we then got the other volunteers lined up on the embankment. So it's going to get attacked, the train, from all sides. It's a very well planned operation, and then you have the Thompson submachine gun. So literally, if you can imagine, volunteers just spread out along the bridge there, and then coming down this way, you have the other volunteers in position, waiting when the signal was given, they would open the attack. And some of the men on the bridge were Barbara O'Connor, Michael Stack, Joe McGuinness, George Nolan, and Jimmy McGuinness, who we know had the Thompson submachine gun. And then looking from the bridge, you can see, imagine volunteers in position on both sides of the embankment. Now, the railway bridge, just that you see in view, there were other volunteers, scouts, posted, because a signal was given that the train is advancing. So you would have had volunteers posted along that bridge as well. So it's a very well planned operation. There was actually volunteers in Inchicore Works. So literally, or sorry, Houston Station, is now Houston Station. Signs or signals will be sent, train is left, it's on the way, it's coming closer. So literally every detail is planned. So here's the operation. And these witness statements, the Bureau of Military History, if you haven't looked at that website, please do. It's free. You've got all of these witness statements. There's 1,700 of them, written by people who were involved from all over the country. And these are first-hand accounts. You've also got pension files. So whereas if you've only got 1,700 of these, the pension files, there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of files. And you'll find more people that were involved in this operation on the pension files. As I said, all free, militaryarchives.ie. But this is Michael J. Stack's account from his account, and what he says, so that's McGuinness, he's sized the bridge with his Thompson gun. The remainder of the section took up positions on the bank of the railway line. When the train, which we were expecting, passed Inchicore, a signal was given, and when the train entered the tunnel of Ballyfermot, I poured the petrol onto the roof of the train. So we know from his account, he's the one that's pouring the petrol on top of the train. We know that McGuinness is the one that's holding the actual machine gun. O'Connor then threw the lighted sacks onto the petrol-soaked roofs, and McGuinness opened fire with his Thompson gun as the train emerged from the tunnel. The section on the bank opened fire with the revolvers. By this time, the train was well ablaze. The grenade men then came into action. Casualties were very heavy on the British that day. All started being attacked with fire, with a Thompson gun, with revolvers, also grenades that were then made in Inchicore Railway Works. So you've got all of these connections. But it's really interesting there that both Michael J. Stack and Padraig O'Connor, they do know casualties were heavy. The media did not report that. There was a reason, a very important reason for that, as in military casualties. So there were reports in the newspapers, but not what the volunteers expected. Now again, we have some accounts, and one volunteer in particular says that they were waiting for the stop press to come out, that this troop train had been ambushed, and there would be lots of coverage. But there wasn't really. You just have little accounts like this in the newspaper. It does make the headlines, but not in the way you think. And unfortunately, tragically, as in all of the cases with a guerrilla war, any war, it is civilians that are the ones that will pay the heaviest price, and we do have it noted in this case. And this is coming from the British military headquarters, their report, so it's coming from basically Dublin Castle. that an official report states that at 1:30 o'clock on Friday the 8th, a passenger train which contained a party of Jordan Highlanders was bombed and fired at Dundalk and Inchicore, County Dublin, and several civilian passengers were wounded, one of them very seriously. The explosions of the bombs with a sharp rattle and machine gun and rifle fire were heard distinctly over a wide area. Now, it must have been terrifying for the passengers to be on that train, and we do have accounts in the newspapers from civilians that were wounded, and it was just chaos that was going on. Fear, the people did not know if they would get out alive. But it continues, the bullets of the attacking party rattled against the train and smashed the windows. None of the soldiers were struck, but at least 4 civilian passengers were injured by bullets or fragments of bombs and glass. The injuries of 3 are not very serious, but the 4th, a Mr. John Russell, was badly wounded and he subsequently died. One leg was severed and the other was injured in several places. He was an employee of Mr. J.J. Parkinson, a well-known trainer, and was taking horses back from the races to the training establishment. So the reason that that man is on that train on that particular day is because he was transporting his boss's horses back to the Curragh to carry out training. So there we know of one casualty. But in relation to any military, according to the official report, there were no soldiers injured, there are no injuries inflicted on the military. This is another report from the newspaper describing very, it captures what it was like. The scene of the ambush was Ballyfermot Bridge. Here, party rebels had made their preparations, and when the train appeared, some posted on the bridge, while others had taken up positions on the embankment on either side of the Fermot Way. When the train reached the bridge, the signal for the attack was given, and a heavy fire was opened from both sides at the soldiers sitting in the carriages. The attackers had placed a machine gun in position, and drums of ammunition were emptied at the train, while some of them used revolvers and automatic pistols, others swung bombs. At the same time, those who were stationed on the bridge poured petrol on the wagons and threw down burning rags in an attempt to destroy the military equipment. The soldiers returned fire, leaning out the windows. A wild panic took place among the civilian passengers, and there was a hurried scramble for safety under the seats. Those who were unable to secure the shelter lay prostrate on the floor, and in some compartments as many as 2 or 3 people were lying on top of one another. So that's a very visual account of what happened. A very accurate account of actually what did happen. And the thing is, it wasn't intention to try to stop the train, but they didn't succeed in doing that. And the train did carry on, eventually stopping at Dundalk railway station, the old Dundalk railway station. And Pádraig O'Connor, because the men had seen the damage that was caused, and Pádraig O'Connor, he went to inspect it, and this is from his witness statements, where he talks about the ambush and then the aftermath. And he says the main party of the ambush opened fire on the military part of the train, and the Gillis with the Thompson gun opened an oblique fire from the sides of the bridge. There was very little return fire from the military. So you can see the newspaper report says the military returned fire, but here we have reports saying they didn't. The train went on. We did not succeed in stopping it. We had greased the rail to stop the train, but it stopped at Dundalk railway station to put off a badly wounded civilian, and the military part of the train was attached at the Curragh siding in order to remove their wounded. From reports received from the Curragh hospital, the military casualties were heavy. But there is a reason why the military would not want information to get out if there were a lot of soldiers wounded. I examined the railway carriages afterwards, and it would seem to bear out that the shooting was very low, concentrated and effective. My party suffered no casualties and retired safely back to sea. Now, if you can imagine, the British think the IRA are underneath, and then they come out and they do this. It had been building up. The thing is, it did make the newspapers, but this was the headline. This is the Evening Herald, and there's 2 big things happening that day. So here you have a peace conference resumed, and then train attacked near Dublin, and the peace conference was the conference that would lead to the truce that would end the War of Independence. So while the IRA all around Dublin and all around the country are attacking military targets, police, auxiliaries, black and tans, you have negotiations, talks going on in the Mansion House in Dublin between the British representatives and the Irish representatives, seeing how they can end this war, this conflict. So the volunteer that says I was expecting to stop press, he didn't get it. But the bigger and important thing is that this is the last major event in Dublin to happen in the War of Independence. Because 3 days later, the truce came into effect. So those negotiations that took place, it actually resulted in a truce coming into effect. Those last 3 days, there were numerous attacks on soldiers, both sides were sort of attacking each other, but at 12 o'clock on the 11th of July 1921, hostilities would be over. That was it. And the Ballyfermot troop train ambush is the last major engagement in Dublin to happen in the War of Independence. And there's the newspapers. The newspapers were full of reports like this, headlines like this, Irish hostilities to cease today, official statements. And, as one volunteer put it, and he sums it up perfectly, when thinking back on the fact that he was involved in the Ballyfermot troop train ambush, that this actually happened. This was a glorious send-off for the ASU after a hard struggle against an enemy that was superior in strength and arms, but not encouraged. The truce was declared the following Monday. So it is amazing to think that a little railway bridge is the scene of one of the biggest events, the last event in a war that literally was the beginning of the end of the British Empire. That's something to be proud of. But what continues is, it doesn't end there, unfortunately. You do have the what follows the truce are the treaty negotiations, which leads to...
He didn't want that.
He didn't want that because we have the Petition of Ireland, which actually happened a year before. Irish politicians would have to take a note of loyalty to the British King. And unfortunately, this signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty leads to that split in the IRA, which leads to the Civil War, which ended 100 years ago yesterday. But when you think of it, of all of those actions, those ambushes, those operations that those men took part in, to think that within a year they would be killing each other. But as we saw with that photograph, 17 years later, they were sitting beside each other, so some of them were able to come back from the divide. But what has been lovely and what has been fantastic about the decade of centenaries is the fact that events like this have been commemorated, because literally those stories have been ignored. They're not the big events. It's not the GPO getting attacked. It's not Michael Collins getting killed down in Ballyfermot. It's not the boarding of the custom house. This is a little railway bridge in Ballyfermot. But because of the interest from people, and thankfully, myself and Cathy have been given the opportunity to research these localities, the stories that are in the localities. And we've been able to certainly say, you cannot tell the national story without looking at the local story. And they are being recognised. And the plaque was unveiled last year.
Who else making the photographs?
There's one in there. There's you. But support from the local council. These are people from the community. So it's the community recognising it's their community's involvement in this huge event that changed the course of Irish history. So they're not going to be forgotten. So now everyone that walks over that bridge will know something happened on that bridge. And it does show that you cannot have the bigger stories without the local stories. And there is the plaque today. Thank you very much.
Massive thank you to both Cathy and Liz. I've probably not just speaking for myself when I say they bring history to life when they're talking about it. I mean, really, you're living it with them. So they're both incredible speakers, and thanks very much to both of them. If you want to take some questions, take some question time. So I was just wondering if anybody had any questions on the topic. Any?
Liz, could I just say, I don't think that attack could have happened anywhere along that track, only there. Because there's a slight bend on that track. And a train driver, actually I think one of the ladies here now, Michael Mellon, he was involved 69, 70, where two lads lost their legs. Again, not doing any to soldiers, but with Robin Baird. He would call them the Mackenzie Raiders. And at Christmas he would do, and he knew that the train would slow down there at that spot. And the two lads lost their legs. They're still living today, but they used to get on the train at the Coilmore Bridge, and that's where you have to build up the bridge on the Coilmore. Yeah, you know, and the train would be jump on there, and he'd start unloading the beer as it turned the corner on that, you know. And it's funny that both incidents happened, that, you know.
And the thing is, you got to remember, the Coilmore Bridge wasn't there at the time. It was only, I think they called it a lay bridge or a lee bridge. All I did was just a service bridge to get to the other side of the track. So Coilmore has the wooden bridge. There's another name on it. I think yeah. And the thing is, only more recent that you have Coilmore Road as you have it, you know, which is now the grand entrance really into Ballyfermot, but it wasn't always like that. That's why we tried to bring you back and show you how important the other road was at the time, exactly as Ken has described, that it was the railway bridge in the area. The other one is a more recent addition. So, you know, sometimes we just take our world for granted as we see it today, but you've got to remember things change, and so trying to go back and imagine there's no real road bridge between Inchicore and you hit that one, and as Ken said, that attack couldn't have happened anywhere else, because if the bend, it's a bridge, the train is probably prepared to slow down for Clondalkin station, you know, so there's all these things, all those elements add to how well planned it was.
I'll make a point that Liz forgot about. We haven't created bring the Thompson submachine. We tried it in an armoured van. And do you know the name of the van? The Green Lizzie. They saw you coming. The other point I'd like to make is O'Connor on the bridge. Corey got a brother on the bridge, Sean O'Connor.
Yes.
Who was dropped. And in the Bureau states, I'd love to say O'Connor was on the bridge.
It's the other.
But I think Corey was at the edge of the bridge with Julie Gillis with Thompson.
Yeah.
But the other point is there was 3 and 4 sections in the active service unit that carried it out, which amounted to 22, amounted to 24. You know what I mean? So there's a few missing on the list.
Yeah, it's a big operation. It is a big
Archie Doyle was there. He was one of the ones that lit the sacks, that threw away sacks over, and he went on to be the person that assassinated Kenneth. You know, so there was always a part. And a lot of the other people on the bridge ran out of the ship that Alison, which was no accident. They said to get Alison, they got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot that were on the ambush of Ballyfermot Village also were on the ambush of Alison.
Yeah.
And there was a 4th fellow there, he escaped. I have a copy of the inquest into Alison's wounds. You know, he was gone.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it wasn't an accident. And he was the centre point of it.
Yeah.
But it just
Because he's
shows,
treated at number 4 section, F company people in each court.
but it just shows the importance of the local knowledge, with the IRA having that local knowledge gave them such an upper hand against the authorities.
Well, of course, the ladies of the F company 4 battalion, you mentioned Mary Flood,
Yeah.
you know, Mrs. Flood, Nellie Bushel,
Yeah.
Maura O'Connor, Corey's sister, Evan Cooney.
Yeah.
These are not great people. They put that says out in the open as much as the other volunteers, you know. Don't mind it. Nellie Bushel in particular, she was a very famous person, but
She made the uniforms. She was a weaver from the Liberties. She made the uniforms.
I lived for her.
Yeah.
I was with her as a kid
Yeah.
for about 6 years.
She's the distinction of being, I think, the only, there may be one other woman that was actually a member of the volunteers. They don't, because the women would not join
Actually,
the
some of the
volunteer.
members of that company,
Yeah.
the ladies, there was very few companies of ladies listed as members, and they've only got 4.
Yeah.
So there's
Mary
a-
Jo? Mary Jo?
Mary Jo, that's
Mary
Nelly Bullshit, very good. This Mary, this
Very
good,
good,
very
yes,
good,
yes,
knows
yeah.
this. She's very good to do that as well.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
the
Big percentage is hugely
Party
important.
is very good to do that.
Yeah, yeah, it's hugely important.
I'm interested in Tommy Gomes.
Yeah.
The mechanics that use them.
Yeah.
They're the same ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Next
I
one.
get worried now when I hear Andy saying he's interested in Tommy Gomes. We didn't come out here for a reenactment. Yeah, exactly, same thing. Yeah.
The IRA forced to use them. The IRA forced to use them.
And the first successfully caged juice happened out here. Yeah. So it's a lot of firsts, you know, and ends. That's why we were trying to give the story of the War of Independence and put up the version of 3 years more or less. But just to show you, it started in the quarry in Tipperary and it kind of ends on the railway bridge in Ballyfermot. So that's the War of Independence.
So has anyone got any other questions or comments that you would have about the talk?
40 years,
Can I just say something, sorry? It is just fantastic. Sorry, what's your name? What's your name? Stacey? Casey. It is absolutely brilliant to see a young girl attending a history lecture. What age are you?
5.
5! Oh my God, I hope you are going to become a historian because if you aren't interested, there's no point. There really isn't. Well, you know what? Then you can tell all your mates, this is what happens on this bridge. And you'll be able to do a talk no better.